Or although
I wanted to have it because I volunteered, and now my little sister told me Disneyland this weekend is going out. They got a last second deal, and I'm like, great, and I have all this homework to do. But I'll do it. I just to quit being a professional. But I won't go.
we haven't rehearsed in like so many months, so I don't know what's going to happen.
Are you set?
I'm good. I'm good to go.
So we'll do the general welcome and then we'll have you talk first. That's fine.
Well, we're like writers, we can plan stuff, man. At one here. Trying to see that text. And it's all next year. She's a singer.
I'm still here.
I don't think I know. She was
It's
kind of like
It's not pictures.
sure if it's She's kind of do you know?
The name sounds familiar.
I'm not like that. I really like because when I and one of her albums.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
By the end of this, probably by...
Yeah, that's good.
At least what happened now and not in the middle. So...
Good evening. Thank you all for coming to our January reading series here at Book Soup. We'd like to thank Julie and all the people here for helping us to organize this event. My name is RaKenna Joseph, and this is Tom Rastrelli. He's going to speak now because I'm done.
Happy New Year! Welcome back to the spring semester. Our theme tonight is the wisdom of Baby New Year. Lessons learned, the wisdom of Baby New Year. So we're here to celebrate a new semester in the MPW program, and we have 5 fantastic student readers tonight and a fabulous faculty reader who will be all reading for us tonight. We just ask you now to quick turn off any cell phones.
Please put them on vibrate.
Please don't text during the show. There's a bathroom in the back of the bookstore. If you go down into the next building and take an immediate right after you go down the 2 steps and go all the way to the back, that's where the restroom is. On this side, there's some food, some refreshments in the back. So if you make your way back there, there's some water, vegetables, some rolls, some things back there if you get a little hungry during the reading. There's also some room to stand over on this side too if you all need to find a place. If you come around the bookshelf, there's room over here as well on this side. So, can you think of anything else? Right. Well, thank you very much for coming. First, we have an announcement. So, let's hear it for the editor of the Southern California Review, P.T. McNiff.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks to Tom and RaKenna for letting me speak here. Briefly, to announce that the latest issue we're going to welcome in 2010 with the last issue of 2009. The latest issue of the Southern California Review is out, hot off the presses. This is the student-run and edited literary journal associated with the MPW program at USC. And like the program itself, it's a multi-genre journal, which has fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and stage play. It includes the One Act Festival winner from 2009 by Matt Cunningham, an alum of the alumnus of the program. The 21st annual Ann Stanford Poetry Prize winner, which was Debbie Benson, for a prose poem called Account of My Daughter. And also has an interview with the author Danzy Senna, done by Danielle Long, who is going to be reading here later tonight. And copies are going to be available, thanks to Julie here at Book Soup, up at the front during and after the reading here. They're only $10. And encourage you to support the journal and support the program, if you could, by picking it up when you're on break here and not listening to some wonderful readers. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the evening.
first reader is a first-year screenwriting emphasis, or has a screenwriting emphasis, excuse me.
Her Myers-Briggs personality type is INFJ, which means introspective, caring, sensitive, gentle, complex, and extremely rare.
Her best New Year's memory is ditching a really big party with a good friend and ringing in the new year at a nearly empty all-night cafe in Chicago instead.
And her best New Year's resolution is this year's resolution, and that is to face life's imperfections.
Going along with that, her theme for the reading is the New Year's resolution, to face life's imperfections. So she's hoping to make a bunch of mistakes in this reading. Just kidding.
Ladies and gentlemen, we give you Jennifer Mitchell.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Mitchell, like I said. Let's see. Okay. I don't know. Hello. Okay.
Sorry. Let's do this.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Thanks. Okay. The first piece I'm going to read is called Drifting. I am flying through the air on a giant red balloon that I have tied to my wrist very tightly. The wind is blowing east, with a cool autumn current flowing in from Canada. The clouds are early afternoon cumulus. I am above Africa. I am above deserts, rivers, wars, and states. I am swaying like an umbrella. I am on a red balloon, so many miles in the sky. I am in New York, Paris, Vienna. I drifted to your house to speak to you, specifically to tell you so many things. But now that I'm here, looking at outdoor light fixtures flicker on either side of your front door, and watching the television blaze through your living room window, the balloon is pulling me away from the ground. It is trying to take me back into the air. I plant my feet firmly on the ground and tug the balloon down by my side. I hold the balloon at my waist, pondering, rethinking this talk I'd planned out in my head. I need to figure out how to say this to you. I need to figure out where to start. I suppose I should explain that after landing 2 houses down near the end of your street, I untied the balloon string from my wrist. I counted to 3, planning to release the balloon on that final count. But when 3 went to my head, I counted to 4. And when 5 went to my head, I continued to 10. I looked at the balloon, still held tightly by my hand, and sighed, unable to let it go. I tied the string back around my wrist and walked slowly to your door. I could begin by telling you about this afternoon with my father, 53, quietly crying. This story's the hardest to get out. I could begin with my father who was dying, and with the muscles in my neck that were tightening near my shoulder and tensing near my jaw to keep my mouth shut, to keep me from using that tone with my father, who cried slowly, arms shifting, extending, and stalling in my hands. Our hugs tended to be awkward. I could begin with the preceding moments this morning when I sat in a cafe, listening to a message on my cell phone, but this part too gets difficult. Or I could start more towards the beginning, with the day that a jellyfish stung me. My foot swelled for 3 weeks, and I could no longer touch the bottom of the ocean without feeling a twinge in my stomach. This part is fun, a memory of happy times, me and my dad. Perhaps that would be the best place to start. A jellyfish stung me at the beach one day. I swam out through the ocean head first. Cutting through waves over and under the current, I was a dolphin, a shark. Some younger boys were splashing not too far away from me. I was pleased to have gone out as far as they had. I must have been about 6 or 7 years old, so full of wonder, and so naive. I let my chubby girl arms lazily blop on the surface until I reached the farthest away sandbar, upon which I placed my left foot and promptly felt a pinch. A jellyfish had stung my littlest toe. After that, I could no longer touch the bottom of the ocean without feeling the prickly prick of seashells and pebbles and sand, like little teeth nipping my toes every time. I could no longer touch the bottom after that and would instead float, for miles to the left and inches to the right, with the waves as they blew with the wind. On family vacations, I would graze on the water until my bathing suit felt heavy and I sunk below the surface. I'd open my eyes and search for fish and fowl and little boys with sharp objects, stay until my lungs hurt, then burst through to the top. I'd look back at the beach at my father, standing silly beneath our red and white umbrella. If I closed one eye, the umbrella would be in the same place it was 10 minutes ago. But with both eyes opened, I'd be 10 feet to the left, a ways from the shore. I would remain this way until my father put his hand up to his forehead and looked out to the sea. He'd scratch above his belly, point out at me, and half in jest, half in fear, run alongside the water until our paths intersected, all the while shrieking, "She's drifting!" I'd giggle, "Catch her, she's drifting!" And I would close both eyes, hold my breath, and sink below the surface. The balloon is ascending into the clouds. It is surrounded by white swirls. I am floating away from your doorstep, then I am floating back down. I was ordering breakfast when my cell phone beeped. "Would you like some tea?" the waitress asked. I had a new message. "Tea? No. Coffee," I said, dialing to my machine. "I drink coffee. Would you like some coffee then?" The message said my father was dying. That one was harder to get out. I'm crying a little now and the balloon is tugging at my wrist. I'm thinking about flying away, but I'm going to stay here and tell you this one last thing. I suppose I could begin this time with this afternoon when my father died. The three of us were in his hospital room, and at some point my mother gasped, then placed her hand over his. The balloon first entered then, right after his heart stopped beating, and they officially pronounced him dead. The nurse brought my mother and I into an empty room to sign papers. A giant red balloon floated in the corner, as if it was trying to comfort us, like a lollipop after a shot. It must have been left there from another visitor, a kid who had lost his first tooth, something simpler, something easy. I tied the balloon to my wrist before we filled out the forms, mostly to just get it out of the way, or do something with it. I felt like something needed to be done. My mother and I then spent hours at her house just staring at one another. The balloon floated above my arm as we sat in her living room. I guess I'd forgotten that I'd tied it there, or was too exhausted to care. I really didn't know what to do with myself in that living room with my mother, just hours after my father died. I looked at her, then looked at the balloon. I tiptoed outside the room, just for a moment, I promised, just to give myself some time alone, then out the front door and into the street. I flew with the balloon, through clouds and thunderstorms. I flew to Paris. I flew to New York and Vienna. I saw the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building all in one afternoon. I flew down to Africa. I galloped with gazelles. I frolicked. I felt free. For a moment, at least. I flew back to America with a pit in my stomach, a weight in my chest, a golf ball in my throat. I needed someone to talk to, so I took the balloon to your house. I came down from the clouds to walk through your front door. I put my feet on the concrete driveway to ground myself, to feel. The string on my wrist is pulling me up now, and I'm dangling a bit in the air. As I enter your house again, smell your hair and hug you hello, you should know that, as we stand here talking, I am trying to hide the balloon behind me, not yet wanting to explain everything. And that as we lean in to kiss, I am nervously sliding my second toe beneath my first, feeling the ground beneath me fall. And that your living room still smells like fern. And that, while I am standing here kissing you, the red balloon is inching towards the chandelier hanging in your entryway. It is rubbing against a hot light bulb. Pop! I look at the balloon, pieces of red rubber on the floor, then back at you. There is no way out. I am stuck. A piece of red rubber is tied to the end of the string on my wrist for just a moment, then falls with the rest on the floor. Here is where it's all going to come out. This next one's a little more fun. It's called Triple X. I I am going to strip right here. Don't tell anybody about the imperfections. I would first like to take off my shirt. It is too warm to wear such a thing. I would next like to untie my shoes. They are keeping me so bound up. I want to move in my trousers, undo the hems. I want to frolic in just an overcoat. I want to run with the streakers and dance with the showgirls. I want to let it all hang out. I want to forget about those places where my skin isn't tight. Pretend that every blemish is covered up. I want to tell you about the time when my hair wasn't washed and I went outside like that anyway, with grease on my scalp and frizz at every end. I want to capture on film each moment that I had spinach in my teeth. Even go for a few close-ups to freeze in on the gunk. I am going to relive the moments that my speech was stuttered, the times that I tripped and fell. I am going to tell you about the weekends that I spent by the phone, just waiting for him to call. I am going to strip, right here. Just, please, don't tell anyone, no one, not even a single soul, that it wasn't, that I wasn't, that this wasn't perfect.
Thanks, Jennifer. Great work.
Our second reader is a first-year fiction concentration.
Her worst New Year's resolution was deciding to move across the country to the west.
Her best decision is deciding to move back to the other side.
And she's here. Her name is Lynn Molly.
I apologize if you really like California. I'm sorry. I'm going to read 3 itty-bitty pieces. One is a portion of a bigger piece, so that's what I'm going to start with. It's called Sugar Pills. That was the spring I forgot to notice. I knew I was in trouble when the irises grew in, but I was still wearing earmuffs. I must have been blocking out sound because somehow I had been feeling out of tune. It only made sense to call the piano tuner. I searched for him through the yellow pages and liked his name best. Chris Plem, Piano Services. It came out like plums. He arrived like licked envelopes. His eyes were all pupil when we first met. Men wear their hearts on their pupils. 2 black beetles revealing their intentions. I complimented his watch, but was really complimenting the tone of his skin against its silver. His lips turned lopsided with the unexpected flattery. It felt a bit silly explaining my situation as if I'd gone to the doctor for a runny nose. There are more than 500 parts on the piano, he told me. He didn't know how many on the human. Still, he set me down and put his fingers to my body, pressing the spaces between skin and bone. His hands landed in controlled quakes, and he listened to the vibrations he was causing. I imagined an orchestra of popping like bath bubbles risen too quickly to the surface. But my ear wasn't pressed to my heart. His was. I knew he could hear it contracting and expanding wildly as he worked. The tension on a piano's strings can amount to 20 tons, he said. We smiled with a shared secret. It was then understood that his motions would continue through my clothes, through his clothes, until it exploded as I had never heard la la la, perfectly tuned. He blew his pitch pipe, to be sure. We matched tones. This became regular for us, and that was when spring occurred to me. I gave him my hand so he could tweak my fingers. Do, 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 re, re. I was a bit lightheaded, but sounded just right. When he finished, he played my fingers. He pressed them like keys. Can you hear it? I wanted to know his music. It sounds rich, filled. He was hearing his good intuition. A few weeks later, we were walking through his yard, relishing in the tall grass and wildflowers. To us, the untamed land was a triumph. His neighbors mistook it for carelessness. They would never accuse him of such behavior if they knew how singularly he treated each key on the piano. The overgrowth scratched my legs like ivy and mosquito bites, or maybe I was actually getting bit. It was just that right time of early evening for insects and sensations. If you twist your hands on the pedals, you can put them right. I couldn't be selfish with his talents. Chris could make miracles with his fingers. He could bring Pluto, tiny and unassuming, to the center of the universe with those hands. But he just rustled the top of some dandelions and seemed distracted. It was then I realized how desperately I needed his tunings. My dissonance was never so apparent to me before Chris, before having been taught the satisfaction of perfect pitch. At some point with Chris, I lost my easy faith in beautiful days and began to rely on tunings to appreciate them. Moments existed only to move me forward in time, forward to my next tuning. It was counting seconds. It was the anxious lapse between the bus arriving and actually getting off the bus. It was sleeping early to get to tomorrow faster. Just my throat, one tapping. I wanted his attention and the gratification of his trinket fingers. You sound fine. I let him walk ahead of me and hummed an even It may have been in key, but my stomach flopped between G minor and B flat. I tried to harmonize with the night crickets, but it didn't seem so important anymore. There's more of that, so if you want it, you can pay me. That's not true. The second is called Taking Temperature. It's flash fiction. I'm making dinner for Mark for the first time. Mark's favorite food is mussels. My favorite food is takeout. Sometimes we can come to a compromise. There's a Thai place downtown that delivers. I'll order the Buddhist feast, and he always gets the mussels yum-yum. He made me try them once. They tasted like dirty water. Mussels, not so yum-yum. I want to like mussels. In college, I took a course in social psychology. We learned about high self-monitors and low self-monitors. High self-monitors observe those around them and act in accordance with the standard. Low self-monitors never monitor themselves the way I do. It also means I'm more likely to be attracted to image-based advertising. I guess I'm just a sucker through and through. I have a grocery bag filled with mussels. On a restaurant menu, it won't tell you that the mussels are bought living. That is why it's so much easier to order them than cook them. Apparently, shellfish must be kept alive just until being cooked. They become toxic immediately after death. I keep imagining myself not cooking them thoroughly enough, eating their poison. It will only be fair. I will have made them that way. There are 20 living creatures in the plastic bag. Every house noise has become new to me. I think they are escaped mussels, nesting in wall crevices, exercising their squatting rights. We're here to stay, they will exclaim, as I desperately research the Homestead Act. I place my hand on the bag, my entire hand, palm, and digits on 20 heartbeats. I may look like a healer in this position, but I'm the opposite. At least I can't feel the beating. I reach in for one. Its shell is like chalk. I hold it between my thumb and index finger and think about how many shells once had owners. I'm sorry, Piglet. I drop it in the boiling pot, and my self-monitor increases by 1 degree. I will be the sauna of self-monitoring by the time I'm finished. Or maybe the boiling pot. Either way, I too will have become toxic. And I have one last one. It's a short one too, so. Okay. My daughter came home from school today, deflated. Her skin looked like a beach ball left to shrivel into its plastic self. I peeled the sections of her body that were sticking to other sections. The top of her right foot was pushed impractically against the corresponding shin, and one arm was twisted several times around her body. How did she get herself scrambled like that? Walking home was kind of tricky. I had to find different ways to maneuver myself. The last syllable was coated with a whelp of pain as I pulled the back of her ears from the side of her head. Once I had separated each appendage into its proper place, I lifted her onto the kitchen counter, where she lay flat, her excess skin spreading around her. She chattered on about her social studies homework and the dance on Friday night, which she probably wasn't going to, as I desperately searched her body for an air passage, almost expecting to find a small plastic closure through which I could breathe myself into her. I barely heard her whisper, "Mom, no one asked me." Bobby came into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, bent his body towards the bottom shelf, and chose a pear. "Could you chew any louder?" Rebecca said, as she suctioned her head off the marble surface. "Tough pear," he replied casually as he walked towards the kitchen table and sorted through mail. His nonchalance and her fiery 12-year-old temper escalated at odds as I retrieved an air pump from the garage. By the time I returned, I was all too consumed with plugging the nozzle into Rebecca's ear to resolve their bickering. I began to pump. Slowly, at first, but then faster with maternal ferocity. Instead of plumping her as I had planned, the manual air only left Rebecca feeling lightheaded and sick to her stomach. Her face was flushed, her eyes watery, but that may have been a lingering effect of Bobby's harsh words towards her. She continued to lay there as flat as when we had started. I gave it up, brushed away the sweat that had accumulated from my pumping and worrying, and swept my hair out of my face to find that Bobby had come in for a better view. "Mom, she's like a Hot Pocket. Just stick her in the microwave and she'll get good and juicy." "I'm not going to microwave your sister." "It might be worth a try," Rebecca added encouragingly through a sniffle. "Susie once put her cell phone in the microwave after she dropped it in the sink, and it sparked a little but was in perfect shape when we took it out." That's how we began to microwave Rebecca. Every day before school, we would wake up extra early and work one joint at a time. We found certain points of her body, her knees, her elbows, her fingers, the tips of her breast, her nose, and each ear, that would excite the larger areas of her body into inflation, filling her up with electric air. In humid weather, I wouldn't let her leave the house without earplugs and goggles to keep her airtight throughout the day. She would protest, claiming her peers would tease her, but I knew better. On those days, she always came home a little more deflated. For those of you who are over in this section right here, we do have some space if you walk the line and come over here. If not, feel free to stay where you are. Our next reader is a first-year student who's chosen nonfiction as his concentration.
An undergraduate, he was a jazz minor.
The best New Year's, in his opinion, was when it was actually a novelty to stay up until midnight.
You remember those days, right? Giving up fast food is simultaneously the best and worst New Year's resolution he thinks you could possibly make.
And he would like for everyone to know that this is for all of those people in his past who have, for some reason or another, decided to sternly ask him, just who do you think you are?
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Fisher.
I'm Paul Fisher, and this is a piece called The Essence of Self While Waiting for Dinner. Perhaps my hunger led to intense introspection. I was on my Hollywood balcony one evening, looking up at what I could see of the semi-obscure night sky, and I couldn't help but feel insignificant. It caused me to ponder some of the bigger questions. What's out there in space, and is it infinite? What am I here for? What's the meaning of life? Does Domino's still honor that 30-minute guarantee they had? Because it's been like 35 minutes already. It's not metaphysics, it's a goddamn cheese pizza. Standing against the railing of my 3x5 terrace that directly faced the TV Guide building, I had none of the answers to these questions, and to top that, I had no pizza. Almost like my view, my thinking that night was mostly obstructed, save for the northeastern exposure that begrudgingly lent me a shard of sky, and with that, the ability to wonder about the heavens. LA was shrouded in purple, and the night was shaping up to be a total failure, so I wondered what I did know. I started at the beginning, with me. Paul Evan Fisher, 25 years old. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm from New Jersey. White and 5'11", so I squeezed in an inch, get over it. Weight, 192 pounds. I'm a Jew, I'm a Red Sox fan, a single but hopelessly hopeless romantic. A son, a grandson, a brother, a cousin, a nephew, a friend, slightly rambunctious and often cynical. Hungry. I went on with some vitals and digressed into a laundry list of things I liked, activities that piqued my interest, various foods that made me drool, sexual conquests, okay, so I'm not some stud, and other attributes and affinities that helped to construct my character, but didn't quite define who I was. I wanted to tackle what I thought was an easy subject before attempting to answer these huge ones. How could I stand there posing such philosophical questions about the essence of mankind's existence, and pizza, if I could not clearly define myself? I was unsure as to whether or not I should be worried, and fleetingly thought about looking up the phone number for the Chinese bistro a couple blocks over on Highland. Then I thought about how others came to self-identification. Maybe I could achieve understanding that way. I knew a lot of people defined themselves by their occupation. This didn't quite work for me as I was unemployed. Immediately, this avenue seemed a bit depressing, but in the interest of my quest, I pursued it anyway. I worked in PR right out of college, so I could define myself in part as a liar. Promoting bad businesses over good ones just because they ponied up the money for our retainer fee. But even though I have lied in the past, and wouldn't bet against future occurrences, I wasn't satisfied with this. It's not that I was bad at my job. In fact, I was pretty good at the linguistic maneuverings one must employ in PR. But luckily or not, depending on the way you look at it, I was laid off after a year and several months of faithful yet heartless service. I felt as if I had been delivered from bondage the day I was let go. I delivered and installed billiard tables in high school and in college for pay, but I don't think anyone in their right mind would classify me as a hard labor-loving fellow. It was a great job with a great boss and a fun product, and I learned a lot about using my hands and fixing things, getting particularly familiar with Brunswick's hardware and DeWalt power tools. The problem was that I was reluctantly handy at best, somewhere between Bob Vila and Bobcat Goldthwait. Work is not only what one is paid for, though, so I then tried to define myself as a writer, since that is what I enjoy and what I spend the majority of my time doing. The frustration, uncertainty, and cynicism that comprises my writing makes defining my life through it seem rather inaccurate. I'm a different person when I write. I slowly backed away from this identity, frightened it might stick. Suddenly, I felt bad for anyone that defined themselves strictly by what they did for a living, because they had no separation from the caricature they have made of themselves. I bet this pizza delivery guy didn't define himself by his job, or based on his performance that evening I thought somehow his life would be lacking. There were those who characterized themselves based upon whom they loved. We all know at least one person like this. Those who lose themselves totally in the pursuit of finding or keeping a significant other. I thought about how I could have defined myself through women from my life and how impossible that would be, because I was always so awful at attracting and staying interested in them. And since I was one of those people with capricious affections, the thought of making myself synonymous with the people I've had strong feelings for would make me the largest entry in the thesaurus. I did not even consider the one serious, albeit absolutely toxic relationship I've had. We love the idea of being together more than we actually loved being together. To be defined through that relationship would ensure that I put a few therapist kids through grad school. Plus, it would only tell the time that I was an oft-used doormat, there to be stomped on if and when it pleased milady. Most relationships proved to be transient anyway, and representing oneself through a bunch of individual lovers would create a poorly edited tape of your life, cut only to show the shared scenes, never faithfully featuring the true star of the production. And I have already partially portrayed myself as a member of a somewhat small but close family. While I loved my family, I was hesitant to wholly identify with them. As I removed the bag of rice cakes in my cupboard, I was reminded of the white nothingness of limbo. There I was, out from under the auspices of my parents, having not yet reached the point where I was clearly on my own, stuck somewhere in a character-defining middle. I felt the figurative distance was necessary if I was ever going to be truly independent and put the rice cakes back without incident. The thought of limbo reminded me of religion. I was raised a Jew and still considered myself one, so didn't that count for something? I knew many people found their true selves in religion, but I also knew I was not one of them. I enjoyed my heritage and culture and even some of the more liturgically influenced aspects of my religion, but I couldn't quite trust it enough to help me find myself. I wanted, from an early age, to believe all the fantastical stories in the Old Testament, but could never separate myself from at least an inkling of skepticism. If we were all created in God's image, then how could one explain bad hair days? One thing about Judaism, and more specifically the Jewish holidays, was that there was never a shortage of food like the one I was experiencing. But even so, religion was out. Getting back to that original list I was putting together, I tried to then think of myself in terms of the activities I performed and the things that I liked. And while this was normally a fun exercise, I thought it important to recognize that no one should define themselves, first and foremost, as a relaxation enthusiast or a donut lover. These things were rather silly, and even someone as serious as a numismatist or one who plays shuffleboard should never sincerely consider this their primary projection of character. These are more definitions based on contrast. If I told you I was a fan of the Golden Girls, then you would only know about that part of me based upon your experiences with fans and avid non-fans of that show. It wouldn't really tell you much about me, except that I appreciated quality television and thought Sophia had it going on. As I continued to starve, it was clear that I was coming up with plenty of ways to not define myself, but I wasn't really getting anywhere closer to my goal. Maybe I was trying too hard or thinking in too abstract a manner, but the question remained regardless of how broad and vague it may have been. I moved to my couch and rested face down so I wouldn't have to see my kitchen. Could I will the hunger away? It was either grand thinking or starvation-induced delusions that brought me to my next conclusion. I realized that all these different ways to go about looking at myself were kind of hitting the mark. There was in fact a bit of me that could be defined as a liar, although that part of me that liked the Golden Girls could never be looked upon in that light. And there was a part of me that secretly enjoyed the rigors and fruits of physical labor. I could admit to feeling good after spending 3 hours putting together a 1,000-pound billiard table, especially when I was tipped handsomely. On Sundays, I was surely a relaxation enthusiast. My football knowledge could attest to that. And I wasn't ashamed at all to declare that I was a donut lover every single day of my life. Strawberry Jerry, for future reference. And there were thousands of other tiny snippets that I could have run through to try to piece together my person, as if I were one of those infinitely frustrating 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzles that wish for you to reconstruct a seascape backlit by an azure sky. 10,000 vaguely blue pieces that have no discernible proper place, but obviously all belong somewhere. But I was quite happy that none of my attributes or loved activities or jobs clearly defined me. I was not all liar. Is that true? I was not all relaxation enthusiast. I was not all writer, and I was happy about that. That way, when something I scribed was judged as a piece of dog excrement, this happened, I wouldn't have to feel so badly about myself. I still did. Then I had a change of heart, mid-inner struggle. I came to the conclusion that the only thing that could truly define itself was a dictionary. Everything else, inanimate objects excluding dictionaries, is a work in progress, and it is pointless to try to encapsulate all of an ever-evolving, wild, whimsical being. Like trying to trap light in a jar, you may capture a sliver of its essence, but there is always more, uncatchable and mysterious in its own right. And it was at this time that my cell phone rang with an unfamiliar 310 number. The delivery man was downstairs and he needed me to come and pay him. Finally, I had my pizza, if not my all-telling self-realization. Partial success. I wanted to tell him that I had waited almost an hour and that I was hungry, that he was late. But I knew that he was only late in terms of the time that I expected him, and that I shouldn't define him in such a way. Perhaps he was just as generous in not defining me as cheap when I kept his tip.
Thanks, Paul.
Our fourth reader, thank you, it's fine, is a second-year student who has chosen nonfiction as her concentration.
And you may not know that she is one of those people, few people that I seem to run into out here, that was born and raised in Los Angeles.
Me too. One of her worst New Year's memories is when she was in high school and her parents refused to let her go out unless they dropped her off and picked her up. They embarrassed her in front of all of her friends. You too?
And her best New Year's resolution was to start reading and writing double the amount that she usually reads and writes. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you Danielle Long.
People don't have to hear me, it's okay. Okay. Sorry if my voice shakes, it's because I'm freaking out. This is a nonfiction piece that I wrote in Dana's class, actually. We'll be reading later tonight. And it's called Stacks of Memories. I see the words pawn shop and loans in simple black letters on the side of a building in Old Torrance, California. Instinctively, I pull over, as if I had been driving all along with the intention of reaching this destination. A brownish film is forming over the shop's white paint, and it sits between two Mexican restaurants. No one comes in or out of the establishments. The faint sound of a slow-paced Spanish song seeps through my barely rolled-down window. I look down the barren street, in the direction of the antique Victorian buildings, at the rose-colored one where my father's music studio was located, where I spent most of my childhood summers. It's a sunny day, perfect for an afternoon stroll, but the sidewalk is abandoned. Two men sit at a bench in a small park across the street, their white painter's jumpsuits streaked with bright blue and yellow. "You want to go look?" my mother asked from the passenger seat, knowing why I've parked here without my saying so. I nod my head slowly, undo my seatbelt, and open the car door. 2 weeks prior was Labor Day weekend 2009. I planned on biking to the Hermosa Beach Fair from my mother's house in Redondo Beach. It was late afternoon, one of those warm days where the blue sky blends directly into the ocean like spray paint, and the waves glisten under the sun like sparkles. It was impossible to be in a bad mood. I had just gotten onto my bike, clad in shorts, sandals, and a brown bikini top, when my mother called down to me from the second-floor balcony. "The guitars are gone," she said, out of breath. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're gone." I didn't process her words. "How do you know?" "I just want to pull them out of the closet. I wanted to show my friend's grandson because they're coming over later and he's into guitars, and they're not in there." I gripped the bike's handlebars and shook my head. "They can't be gone. You're just not looking in the right place," I said. "The cases are empty," she said. "There's no way you're looking in the right place. I'll find them." My voice was shaking. I threw my bike on the ground and ran inside. The walk-in closet in the empty, white-tiled master bedroom holds most of my father's possessions that my mother and I chose to keep. A faded pair of Levi's with a white guitar pick in the back right pocket. A vintage shirt from the Goodwill that looks like the alphabet threw up on it. He bought it for a 60s costume party, but to my embarrassment, wore it at least once a week. A dusty keyboard. French military medals that belonged to his father. Black socks that I wear to bed in the winter. 2 stacks of books. 4 large boxes of photos. 1 manila envelope holding medical records, mainly diagrams of his blocked arteries. A sea green down feather coat. 2 Yankees hats, and the Yankee baseball tee he was wearing when he met my mother. And most importantly, the guitars. A shiny black acoustic he played every day. An electric with remnants of red paint that desperately needs to be refurbished. 2 vintage acoustic electrics, one a Fender and the other a Gibson, which he bought at age 18. Besides a trash bag full of clothing, those 2 guitars were the only belongings he had when he showed up on my mother's doorstep in Puerto Rico 30 years ago. They met while he was on tour with his band, and he fell in love with her immediately. He couldn't stand to be away from her, and left his New York life behind so they could start one together. Our lives started with those guitars, my mother always says. He specifically left those guitars to me in his will. 3 cases were lying on the ground, closed but not latched shut. I cringed because I was used to seeing them in the corner, stacked perfectly behind one another. She wasn't looking in the right place, I thought to myself. I breathed in and out, then kneeled down next to the cases. The Fender. Opened the Fender first. He didn't like it as much as the others. I looked at the top of the squirt case with both hands and saw the orange velvet outline of a guitar staring back at me, along with some sound chords. I petted the velvet and knocked a spider web out of the way. Next, I went for the black acoustic. He let friends and acquaintances play that one at parties and referred to it as the community guitar. I could stand the thought of losing that one. The case felt light, but I opened it anyway just to confirm what I already knew. I took 5 deep breaths before opening the Gibson case, which held a vintage 1969 ES-335 mahogany guitar. It took him long to save up for, and he used it only during performances and recordings. Not many people knew that he owned it. The case creaked as it opened. There was a guitar inside, but instead of the Gibson, it was a guitar with the red paint that desperately needs to be refurbished. He never told me a story about it, which told me it didn't mean much to him. I picked it up by the neck to check if there was something underneath, if there had been a mistake, but all I saw was electric blue felt and a coiled, unused guitar string. I curled up next to the case and hugged it, running my fingers down the felt. I squeezed my eyes shut for a few minutes, thinking that if I squeezed hard enough, they might reappear. On the phone, a dispatcher told me to find pictures of the guitars so I'd have something ready when the officer arrived. I took the 4 photo boxes out of the closet and into the living room, and started looking through the stacks of pictures, at the memories I had been blocking out for 7 years. He was always there. Me before the homecoming dance when I was 15, us overlooking the ocean in Saint-Malo, France when I was 4, the picture of our old duplex with the haunted house tarp over it for Halloween, moments I used to consider happy, a different life. I found a picture of him playing the Gibson in the 80s. He wore a white suit and had thick black hair, a mustache, and a beard. His best friend Richie's hands play a set of gold drum to his right, his face concealed by the cymbal. I noticed the microphone in front of my dad, the guitar strap over his suit. He adjusts a knob with his right hand and has his left fingers on the guitar strings. I had never paid such close attention. I took that picture of him, my mother said, looking over my shoulder. That's when we first met. I found a picture of my Uncle Angel playing the Fender at one of our Halloween parties, then one of her friends playing the community guitar. Officer Paul Smith arrived 90 minutes later. I took him downstairs to the empty, white-tiled room. He touched the cases, flipped them over, picked up the cords out of the Fender case. He examined the closet and asked me questions. I handed him the pictures. "Have the guitars always been in this room?" he said. For the past 5 years. "When was the last time you saw them?" 6 months ago, I think. I don't look at them too often. They're too special to look at every day. "Has this room always been empty?" "Some of our family members lived here, but we're close with them. They wouldn't take them." "Anyone else come in and out of your house?" "Housekeepers and carpet cleaners, construction workers too." "Do you have the serial numbers?" "I wish. My dad left them at his ex-wife's. They've been divorced for 30 years. I wouldn't know how to find her." He looked around the room. "You know, I remember this house," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. He laughed. "You used to have all kinds of parties here, didn't you? Your neighbors used to call us complaining almost every weekend." I started laughing. Yeah, my dad was a big fan of the karaoke parties. He always found an excuse to invite people over and play music really loud. The officer cleared his throat. "Sounds like he was a fun guy." He walked along the bedroom's balcony door. "Doesn't look like anyone broke in." "Can't you test for fingerprints?" I asked. "You'd have to hire a private detective to do that. Do you have any idea who could have taken them?" "I have no clue," I said. "I don't know why anyone would do that. It's the worst thing you could do." "I'm sorry for your loss and that someone took your guitars," he said, scribbling in his notebook. "Call me if you think of anything at all." He handed me a piece of paper with a case number. I pull on pawn shop and loan's metal barred door. It's locked, and before I can figure out whether to knock, a man behind the counter buzzes us in without looking up. To the right, I see glass cases holding diamond rings, brooches, and gold necklaces. The carpet is tan with large dark stains, and the room smells like mildew. I look up and see dozens of guitars hanging from the ceiling, stacked behind one another like dominoes. "They might be here," I say out loud. I examine each of them. They are red and blue Fenders, all Squires, the same model as my dad's. I look carefully for a beige one with a red guitar pick sticker, but there is nothing. 2 Hispanic men are now standing behind the counter. "Are these the only guitars you have?" I ask. One man nods. I peep my head over the counter to the employees-only section of the store. The door is open, and I see dozens of guitar cases. He turns to see what I'm looking at. "They're on a 30-day hold," he says sternly. "Legally, I'm not allowed to show you those." My mother chimes in. "We had some guitars stolen from our house." He shakes his head defensively. "The police have access to our records, so ask them." I look behind the counter again, studying the cases. They are cheap, black, and generic. Various guitar types have fit inside. "They were my dad's guitars." I start again. "He left them to me in his will. I'm mainly looking for a Gibson, and I know I can't buy anything today, but if you would just let me look, I can't help you," he says. I clench my fists and stare at the diamond rings in the case below me. So you mean to tell me that if my stolen property is back there, even if it belongs to me and was stolen from my house, you can't at least let me look at it? Not a chance. That's bullshit, I say. My mother puts a hand on my shoulder and leads me toward the exit. I take a deep breath and yell at a sarcastic "thank you" and walk out. We make our way down the street, past the restaurants playing the same music as before. We come across 2 more pawn shops. The first one is small, carrying only iPods and guitars, none of which are my father's. "We don't do that," a woman responds when I ask if people try to pawn stolen items. In the next shop, one wall is completely covered in fenders, and the other with rifles. There are pocket knives in the glass cases instead of jewelry. When a man behind the counter asks if I need any help, I notice there are several guitar cases behind him. The rifles intimidate me, and I stammer. Am I only allowed to look at the guitars hanging on the wall?" "Yes, that's all we have, miss." I point to the stack. "What about those?" "The only ones available are on the walls." "Can you just tell me if one of those is a Gibson? You have no Gibsons on the walls. Come back next week." "I just want to know if there's a Gibson back there. I don't even need to see it." "If you want to know what's back there, you have to come back." I quickly walk out before I start to argue. As I exit the shop, I wonder if there's some detail I'm missing, a distinct mark on the guitars that will help me distinguish them from the many others. "Call Uncle Richie," my mother says. "He's the drummer whose face is covered by the symbol in the picture I found for the police. He's known my father since the 6th grade and knows more about him than my mother." I stand outside of the shop and dial. "I can't believe they're gone," he says, surprised. "Neither can I. Can you tell me anything about them that distinguishes them from the others? I wish I had paid more attention." Richie doesn't tell me anything I don't already know, but before we hang up, he asks me a question. "What happened to the 4th guitar?" "What do you mean?" I ask. "You said 3 were taken, but what about the 4th, the Hagstrom guitar?" "The only one left is an electric that looks like it used to have red paint on it. My dad never told me any stories about that one." "That's the one. It used to be painted red with little white birds," he says. "That was your dad's first guitar. He bought it when he was 14, and that's how we started our band. At least you still have that." "That makes it a little better," I say. When I hang up with Richie, I ask my mother if she knew the story behind the Hagstrom. Strangely, she had no idea it was my father's first guitar. She and I stand in front of the shop a few seconds longer, happily absorbing the new piece of information. We take a different route to the car and pass several antique shops, one which sells pink wigs from the 60s and a Foster's frieze. We turn a corner and are directly across from my father's building. I walk to the middle of the abandoned street and stand motionless, staring at the structure for a minute. I remember the phone number to his studio. I am tempted to call him, to tell him to come out and meet me. I run towards the building and my mother follows. The door is open, and I walk up the maroon carpeted stairs I haven't seen since my teens. The hallway is as quaint as I remember. I slowly graze my fingers across the flowered Victorian wallpaper, remembering that I wanted this very wallpaper in my room when my dad first rented the studio. He couldn't find it, so he bought me a comforter with the identical print instead. I check the window near the bathroom to see if it's still stuck shut. On hot summer days, we both used to try to pry it open. It doesn't budge. I look outside at the street and remember drinking cream sodas with my father while we walked across. I'm grateful that these memories are still stacked in my head, that no one can take them away. I hesitate for a minute, then walk to the end of the hall and turn left. I am face to face with the corner office that used to hold all kinds of music equipment. He used to spend the majority of his time here and would stack the guitars neatly in a corner. I would lean on them in color, waiting for him to finish perfecting whatever song he was working on. I wonder what it's being used for now, if someone else stacks their guitars in the same spot while their daughter waits around patiently. I want to be there again, but the door is locked and the studio lights are off. I crouch down and open the mailbox slot. With my eyes closed, I stick my nose inside and take a long, deep breath.
Thank you. Our last reader of the evening is a second-year poetess.
At one time, she lost a tug-of-war to a monkey in Bali. The little shithead stole her water bottle.
Her best New Year's memory? She kissed a girl, and she liked it.
Her worst New Year's resolution was to frequent casinos until she hit a jackpot.
And lastly, she wants everyone to know that she still wants her water bottle back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cristiana Chun.
I hate how my voice sounds in a mic. Is that how I normally sound?
It's good. It's touchy. You sound fine though. There we go.
Okay. So I have poetry, but they're short. So it's like maybe like 3 minutes or so. But I hope you enjoy it. The first two I'm gonna read are about my nephew. His name is Josh, and I love writing about him. He's 6 years old right now, and on his 6th birthday I said, "Oh my gosh, Josh, you're so big, you're already 6? And he said, "I'm almost 7. And then I just saw him today before I came, and he gave me this as a present. And then I'm going to read to you a Snapple fact. It says, it says 6-year-olds laugh an average of 300 times a day. Adults only laugh 15 to 100 times a day. So, okay. This one's called 5 Days Old. Holding a newborn infant is like carrying a fishbowl filled to the brim with the freshest of waters, moving especially slow not to spill a drop from this miniature world so spotless, while staring in at the single fish, moving its golden scales, up, down, in swivels, a butterfly in water, my nephew's tiny heart alive. I told you they're short. This next one is called Empathy, Josh. It was requested by my friend. I didn't want to read it. Okay. Empathy, Josh. No, it's not. Empathy, Josh. Okay. Banana was his first word. It came after 3.5 frustrated years. His younger sister was speaking sentences. He stops mid-street and stares up at a flag that moves with a gentle wind like the dolphins swerving in and out of the ocean. He lifts and flaps his hands, each little finger dancing along, unaware of the people staring. He's rushed to the emergency room, this time a mini Batman toy that was still too big to climb down his throat. He comes out, calm as a doll's face, the only one not crying. Crouched over a cat that's been run over on his street, he waits long minutes, then cries for hours past his bedtime, asking, was that his 9th life? He always plays a genie, waving 3 fingers grandly at his sister's face. I wish I was a bird so I can fly everywhere, she says. He brings her their dead parakeet, freshly dug up, and pushes it in her mouth. Mommy says you are what you eat. Okay. I don't know, should I do another poem?
Yeah.
Or should I read a short story? Poem? This one is called Ars Poetica, and I guess it's just kind of like what writing poetry means to me. But it's written in the voice of me when I was like younger, just so you know. Okay, Ars Poetica. I dangle my feet outside the porcelain stand with my small elbows digging in my lap and my face down, round cheeks resting heavy upon my open palms. Sitting on the toilet was my time to think about the age of my new 2nd grade teacher, about how much I missed my dad who was rarely home, and about how I was more scared of my older brother than Freddy Krueger. I looked up and saw a fresh tube of toothpaste on the sink. I stared at it as I debated the consequences. The tube of Colgate drew me to it like the lights of a casino would draw in my dad. I jumped on cold floor with my bare feet and went right to it. I grasped it in my greedy hands. I felt so powerful in my house for the first time. I twisted off the cap and started from the bottom of the tube, as trained by my mom, and slowly squeezed as hard as I could, up and up and up, until the entire tube was in the sink, a wild swirly blob. I stood there a conqueror, gleaming at my work when I was interrupted by my mom, who was wondering why I was in the bathroom so long. I began to panic, but I just couldn't bring myself to ruin my creation, my pile of sticky blue bliss. My mom came in and gasped in horror, as she had the week before when she found out my dad had pawned her diamond ring to go gambling. Her exaggerated reaction frightened me. "What a waste," she yelled, and ordered me to go sit in timeout. Frustrated, I sat facing the chip white corner of my room. I didn't understand how doing something that brought me so much joy could be a waste. My mom is the one who told me that happiness was priceless. This was my $2 joy. I have one more.
Go ahead.
This doesn't need any introduction. It's called Earthquake in Haiti. A child staggers to a dumpster, hungry. Her tangled locks bleached from the fallen homes. Searching for her mother, she climbs in. That's it.
Well, thank you to all of our student readers. Let's give them all another round of applause.
Our faculty reader for the evening has worked at The New Yorker since 1999. For 4 years, she was a senior editor. Now she is a staff writer, covering a wide variety of subjects for the magazine, and often writing about literary and cultural figures. Go to DanaGoodyear.com.
She is also the author of Honey and Junk, which is a collection of poems, and it's actually available down near the front of the store. And her work has appeared, Honey and Junk, it was published by W. Norton in 2005.
In addition to The New Yorker, her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Review of Books, and many other magazines and periodicals.
And she's on the board of Red Hen Press, which is a non-for-profit publisher in Los Angeles. And she teaches literary nonfiction with an emphasis on new media in our program.
I Heart Novels, her article about Japanese cell phone novelists, was written while she was in Tokyo as a Japan Society Media Fellow. And it was also included in the Best Technology Writing of 2009.
Ladies and gentlemen, I heart Dana Goodyear.
Thank you. That's all right. That's all right. I speak loudly, as everyone tells me in restaurants when I'm talking about people I shouldn't be talking about, so I think we should be okay. But I just wanted to thank you, Tom and RaKenna, so much, and thank you to Book Soup and everybody for coming, and especially to the student readers who were so great and such a pleasure to hear. And I'm sorry I gave you no fun material for your intro.
It's okay.
You did well with it. What did I do? On New Year's Eve this year, just to stay with the theme for a moment, I went to the observatory at Griffith Park, and if you haven't been to the new planetarium show, that is a wonderful way to, it was actually a great thing to do on the last night of the decade, because you feel very, very small in these bucket seats looking up at this dome where, you know, all of space and time is being projected, and that was, and then for more time travel, we went to a steakhouse on Hollywood Boulevard that's been around since 1919. It's the oldest restaurant in LA, and they make larger claims that I can't really, as a teacher of nonfiction, I cannot repeat here tonight about their status in terms of longevity in the world. I'm going to read some poems, then I'm going to read a short piece of fiction. You know, I think, can everybody hear me all right, just like this?
you all
All
hear
right,
me?
let's just go for that. Fishing. Oh, and I do want to say, pretty much, I chose the poems that I'm reading tonight and the piece of fiction because it's all new work, and that's my way of honoring Baby New Year. But also, most of these pieces have some kind of relationship to babies, actual babies. Fishing. Suddenly, everyone's a naturalist, and a mystic, and a killer, tenderly brutal. They seem to be such individualists, jumping in the sun, practical as iron needles darting their wet shroud. The child catches one of keeping weight. We call her pregnant, the female full of eggs. But she is pregnant the way a newborn girl is, with everything she'll ever have. Twilight, we eat her raw, and then we eat her roe. The Gravel Garden. This is based on a very famous Zen garden in Kyoto. We sat in the gallery looking at rocks, tigers swimming, mother and child, corpse. I thought of one angry monk saying, "Sweep," another teasing. The idea being, a speck turns vast if you stare long enough. We were 1 week married. Here, in the opposite of Eden, in the dry peace of no fruit, 25 meters is equal to infinity. Fig. Miniature woman, all womb. I don't see you, brown, uncamouflaged as the bottom or nipple in a dream, till the Beatles buried himself to the neck in your soft flesh. That one, I should say, is part of a group of kind of miniature poems that I've been working on. Very, very short. I think that is maybe a hazard of being an editor professionally, having been an editor professionally, and sort of, I think, continuing that through my teaching now, that it's very easy for my work to dwindle and dwindle down to almost nothing. I'm very into erasure. Not the band. This is called Objet Petit A, and the title comes from a sort of a somewhat obscure part of psychoanalytic theory that talks about the unattainable object of desire. Remember its pulse on the salt-swollen porch, both body and gash. That starfish you rescued, stranded when found on the winter beach. A hand pantomiming kleptomania. Stop, thief. Slick, warm, red clot. Who knew what it meant by living? It should have turned hard into ornament, but stayed wet, like guilt. It was kind of mean of me to write that poem because it's about, as poets in the room know, often how you feel having written a poem. But a friend of mine had rescued a starfish from the beach in the middle of winter and brought it home. And the thing just would not die. I mean, she wanted it, you know, she was sort of thinking she was saving it because it wasn't going to have, I mean, you could have put it back in the ocean, but it was beautiful, and I understood why she wanted to make it part of her personal collection, but it never turned into an object. It just stayed this, persisted in staying a body, and that was very upsetting to everyone. And then I reminded her of it a few years later by writing this poem and giving it to her. This is called Freeway. And this is a poem that it's longer than the other ones that I've read. But it's also, just to reiterate my point, it started off as a poem that was twice as long as what I'm about to read. It had 4 parts, and now it has 2 parts, and I've done versions with 3 parts, and I've got Freeway 1 part, Freeway 2 parts, Freeway 3 parts, Freeway 4 parts, and at some point I will stop playing and just understand that it's in its final form, but I've never read it this way, so this still counts as new, even though I've read it in other forms before. Freeway. Sensitives can feel it in their headaches and their bones. This afternoon, the color of coyotes on the loose. The city's set to burn. Mothers grab their 2-year-olds. They're the shape of prey. Get in their cars and drive away. The wind comes on like a dry drunk, out of the desert junkyards with one thought. This is how it starts. Child with a love letter, man with an itch, a patch of unaccountably hot earth. On the freeway, a tumbleweed of hair and teeth, a tuft of insulation, uterine pink fluff, the suggestion of creation. A mound of fur you could put your hand inside for warmth, and the roadkill palm fronds shiny as cicada shells. The world's agglutinative slough, its shuck and mud and food, effluvia and fuel. 2. Alongside this, a river. Somewhere headwaters, somewhere a mouth. It begins with thought and ends with speech, while the road just drains and drains, gray, nervous miles. I drive all day, under a strike surface scratched by skywriters' mistakes, through the city bleeding silver as a video game, past Nadaland, past Mojave, toward the bodies decomposing in the quiet valleys killers used to ranch. Behind me, in my mind, the lurid birds of paradise bend their orange faces toward the pool to drink. But the pool is full of flames, and the trees are ash shadows, and the skies so dark night-blooming whites release themselves to moths too singed to reach them. The yellow vine presses its wax ear against the warping glass, as the deck chairs, pale and worked as bones, somehow hold their ground. And this is an untitled piece of fiction. It's in very short sections, and if I forget to read the section numbers, or I decide that that's too distracting, a longer pause will indicate that I have started in the next section. Prologue. Don't read this if you are pregnant, or my sister, or my friend, especially if you are pregnant and my sister, or pregnant and my friend, a condition that applies to most of my sisters and friends. The suspension medium of this document is thimerosal. Also, don't read this if you are my husband. 1. It seems right that I am writing this in the dark. Driving home, our hill was a pitch mound, unconscious, brain dead, no electricity anywhere. This is what happens when the wind blows in Los Angeles. I just got back from dinner with X, who recently had her second child, and X, who is about to have her first. They talked a lot about diaper bags. X kept rubbing her belly and saying, "Hi, baby." 2. Playing, as a child, I would call blind, mute, deaf, chronically ill, youngest and never grows old. I would also practice riding my bike with one leg and my eyes closed, because the chances that I would lose a limb and be blinded by a roadside bomb, perhaps, were very high in suburban Ohio. This is how crazy it is. I am jealous of X and X, my two friends who are planning a trip to Compton to find an H1N1 vaccine. 3. Just like in a fairy tale, my hair is turning white. 4. My brain does not communicate with my ovaries. 5. I have a Spanish hairdresser. Call her X. She is in her late 30s and smokes heavily. During her last pregnancy, on summer days, she would stand by the window of her salon, cooling down. There was no air conditioning, and blowing thick streams out past her 8-month belly. There are 2 things she's been wanting me to do for years: dye my hair platinum blonde and have a child. One day she calls me and said, "What's the matter? Are you not fucking enough?" and starts laughing into her exhale. 6. This is how crazy it is. I read Heartburn and wish the narrator would stop bragging about her pregnancy. 7. We spend Labor Day at the beach with X. X has 3 children and is very easily distracted. One of the children, seeing a waitress she recognizes, calls out excitedly, "She's pregnant!" X looks at me. "Not me," I say, "the waitress." "Wait, you're pregnant?" X asks, every 7 minutes or so for the first half hour of breakfast. 8. There's something in me the size of a grapefruit, the doctor says. The prescription: no sex plus birth control pills. Y stops in the men's room on the way out. He notices a television screen in the corner of the room. He pushes eject on the built-in DVD player, and a movie comes out. Double Stuffed Honeys 2. 9. On Sunday night, there's a pregnant woman standing beside the off-ramp to the 2. She is skinny, her belly urging out of a tight white synthetic shirt. Maybe 6 months. I can't read her sign or see her face in the dark, only the belly pulsing white like a night-blooming flower to a furry black moth. 10. I've started to be afraid of dying, or of killing someone by accident, or of why dying or killing someone by accident. The other night I dreamed we were on our way to a meeting, of all places, at the SLS Hotel. We were taking a non-existent route there, along a street that looked sort of how Wilshire does when you're almost to downtown. Markets spilling into the sidewalk, people in and out of groceries and bakeries, teenagers running across the street unexpectedly. We turned, and the car in front of us somehow caused us to drive onto the sidewalk and hit a family that was sitting on their stoop. Instantly, we knew that we had killed a child, a 2-year-old baby. No one was going to hold us to account. It was the other driver's fault. The family, crying, loaded the child, now just a blood-soaked lump, into an ambulance and forgave us. 11. X calls to tell me she is pregnant and starts crying. The main reason she is having the baby, she says, is to please her other child, who desperately wants a sibling. 12. We start to fight about eggs. For years, I boiled them to just congealed perfection, never timing, always by instinct knowing the right moment to turn off the boil and how long to let them sit in the water. One night last winter, the eggs were underdone, slippery with white discharge. Y didn't want to eat them. I was irritated, but tried again. This time I knocked one of them against the saucepan when I dropped it in. When the water boiled, a ribbon of cooked egg issued like a mutant limb from the crack. Now Y was annoyed, and I was very annoyed, and I told him he could do the eggs then. He made his own dinner, and I had a salad, and neither of us had eggs. It happened again more or less like this a few weeks later. The next time he said, "How long do you cook them for?" I said I had no idea. He is precise. He wanted a recipe. I think of myself as someone who can cook, who has cooking instincts, who, if nothing else, knows how to boil an egg. It was mortifying, but I looked it up in the New York Times cookbook. The recipe contradicted my methods completely. For instance, it said to boil the water first. I had never done that. Then it said to put the eggs in the boiling water gently, using a spoon so the eggs would not crack onto the bottom of the pan. On the bottom of the pan. Oh. I handed the book to Y. I might have lost the ability to boil an egg, but I still wasn't yet the kind of person who could consult a cookbook while boiling an egg. The recipe suggested one cooking time for very soft, 3 minutes, and another for hard, 10. He tried 6 minutes, too soft. He is methodical and tried again, this time for 8 minutes. Perfect. We are 8-minute egg people. Suddenly everything was fine. The day the doctor said the cyst was gone, the movie in the men's room was Anal Titans. XXX. 14. We did the injections in the kitchen. The FSH spilled on the counter and I started to cry. Y thought it was because I was frustrated that he didn't know how to give a shot, but it was because it felt so strange to see the FSH on the kitchen counter. I felt like part of my body, a hidden liquor secreted by my pituitary gland, had escaped. It felt like something private on display, and then came the horrifying recollection that it wasn't even mine to begin with. Injectable FSH comes from the urine of postmenopausal women. 15. X feels trapped. 16. X was due today. She is having bloody show, which she says sounds like the title of a poem. 17. This morning, Y came out of the bathroom, sobbing. In my confusion, I thought he was acting. I had not seen him cry in this particular way before. Later, he said, they were tears of joy. I've never cried tears of joy. He held up the test, and for the first time in my life, the symbol in the window was an X. Thank you so much.
Perfect way to round out the evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just want to make one last little plug. These two, please support our SCR. It's student run. There's student fiction, nonfiction, poetry, screenplay, you name it, it's in here. Pick one up, and it's only $10, right?
And there is a piece by Danielle in here, right? Or is it an interview?
It's an interview.
It's an interview with Danielle that's in here if you'd like.
Work. And also Honey and Junk by our featured faculty members. So please support our students and our faculty.
And Dana will be hanging out up in this area, is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you do buy her book and would like her to sign it, come and find her, and she said she'd be happy to do that.
Okay, we have some parting gifts in the back. They're nothing special, but some water, some danishes, and some vegetables if you want some. Next month, we'll be meeting February 19th. Will be about the men. So please come out and support.
7:30 at the Grove at Barnes & Noble.
Yes.
So please come join us next month. Thanks again for coming tonight.
Have a great night.